How We Escaped.
Rob Drake here. You are about to hear a powerful and moving conversation with my guest, Nate. But I need to warn you that our discussion contains strong themes of sexual abuse, spiritual abuse, and suicidal ideation. You will also hear strong language. Listener discretion is advised. And two disclaimers. When I was a teenager, my family was involved with the group that we are about to discuss today. And, as always, the views and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the podcast or of me, your humble host, Rob Drake. Now, let's get to today's story. It's early July in Knoxville, Tennessee. Evening time, but still light outside. More than 1,000 homeschooling families have gathered in the spacious Thompson Bowling Arena at the University of Tennessee. Tonight is the grand finale of a week-long annual homeschooling conference held by the Institute in Basic Life Principles, or IBLP, led by Bill Gothard.
For the last session of the conference, they would gather all the kids up. They put us in the seating behind the stage, and there was thousands and thousands of kids, and organize us by what range you were singing in.
Our guest is Nate. Nate grew up in the world of IBLP, and he has an amazing story to share with us today. And Nate knew these conferences well because he attended 4 or 5 of them with his family.
So we would sing a few hymns and then sit down, and Gothard would come up and would say a couple of things and talk about how encouraged he was and reference all the incredible youth behind him. And all of our parents were beaming and just so proud of us.
And then a hush falls across the stadium, and the conductor makes a hand motion, and
we all stand, which makes it a low roar, and it's a sea of white shirts of all of these young people, I would say probably 4th grade up through high school, maybe young college age, performing the hymn.
I was watching one of these performances on YouTube. I don't know which year, but it was quite a remarkable sight.
Yeah, my eyes are tearing up a little bit thinking about it.
What is so significant to you about this song?
The song itself is fine. The environment in which it was performed and sung in was not fine. I hadn't thought about that song for years and years and years until my wife and I were watching one of the episodes of Shiny Happy People, the documentary about the Duggar family on Amazon. And in one of the episodes, it cuts to the scene of all of us as children. You may have been one of the participants that year from the footage that they used. For kids, it creates this cognitive dissonance that no matter what happens to you, no matter what is going on, it is going to be worth it all, because if we're good soldiers for Christ, we get to go see Jesus one day. No matter what's happening, it's worth it. When I saw that the first time when we were watching the Shiny Happy People documentary, my wife watched me watch the show, and I watched the show, and parts of it just unlocked all of this anger and all of these tears that I didn't even realize were there. There were moments where it was all I could do to not, put my fist through the TV, trying to process, as an adult man, right? As an adult man, something that happened decades ago, trying to process these buried memories and why the hell am I reacting in such a visceral way to these clips.
A song, a documentary, a flood of memories. In this episode, Nate takes us into his past, the moments that made him and the ones that nearly broke him. But stick with us, because his story does not end in despair or darkness. That's what's coming up on the How We Escaped podcast.
You're listening to the How We Escaped podcast with Rob Drake.
Greetings, fellow sojourners. Welcome to the How We Escaped podcast. So, Nate, tell us more about these IBLP conferences in Knoxville. What did you do the whole week?
There's breakout sessions, but a lot of it, as for the children, throughout the day, the kids were shuttled off to other breakout session assembly areas, and then the parents received whatever training that they did, and the kids would teach us sing songs. They would do studies with us, teach us principles, teach us things, that some of it worthwhile, a lot of it not worthwhile whatsoever. And it was quite the show. It was quite the show. And every evening session, Bill Gothard would come up and he would give the evening session.
What was it like, those evenings with Bill?
He was a small man with a cadence that was difficult to track in his speaking style, but everyone was on the edge of their seat waiting to hear what his latest revelation from God had been, and so that we could carry it with us back to our homes across the country and sometimes the world.
Yeah, do you remember Bill Gothard in the evening sometimes? He would draw. Wasn't he an artist?
Yeah, he did those chalk talks.
Yeah.
He would there would be this big canvas of a thing sitting on an easel, and he would give some parable type of a story, or tell a story of some family he had been working with, or a young person he had been working with, and the whole time he would be talking and drawing, and which I feel like some of that was like part of how his work got started back in the late 60s, when he was working with people in the Chicago area. He would just give these lectures and create this artwork, which it was surprisingly decent. And then the culmination, the grand pinnacle of the story would hit, and then lights would go out and these black lights would come on, and then there would be this completely different picture of something, that maybe Jesus on the cross, or Jesus holding a sheep or whatever. But there was this black light event that happened that revealed this other hidden picture within the picture.
That's right.
And it was always very impressive. Everybody gasped, and it just added
It was like
to the
magic.
It was magic.
I mean, I wasn't allowed to believe in magic growing up, but that was about as close to magic as I would see.
If Bill Gothard did it, then it was acceptable.
That's right. Do you remember seeing any IBLP celebrities when you were there, like the Duggar family?
Sure, yeah, I remember the last couple of years that I attended IBLP. I went to it 3 or 4 times in the early 90s with my family, and then I joined the Alert program, and then went about 3 times as part of the Alert program. But the Duggar family they were kicking around. There'd be a main session, and then there would be like an announcement or a little side production thing, and they would bring large families up to sing a song together or play their violins and whatever instrument together as a testimony thing, and they would give a little sideshow before the next main session kicked off. Or they would sometimes bring up a bunch of families who had had children after having like reversal babies or what have you, which was like a wildly personal
Yeah.
thing to talk about in front of thousands of people. But anything that produced a good story and a good testimony to reinforce the message was acceptable fodder for stage presence. And I personally knew people who got to walk up on the stage and be a part of a thing, and it was always quite the honor. And there was definitely a measure of celebrity status that one achieved for about 12 to 24 hours if you were on the stage.
Well, Nate, let's go back to your childhood and talk about your family. Tell us what a normal day looked like for you.
We were homeschooled, and back in the day, the homeschool now and the resources now is so much better than it was back then. I may have a formal education level of a 5th grader, and then have spent my adult life backfilling in understanding and knowledge and education along the way. But a normal day would be, we would read the wisdom books, which was the educational curriculum that IBLP had all the families purchase, and then go through. And so we would do that. We would start off with a wisdom search and having like a family Bible study reading thing in the morning, and which in itself was fine. Go through the wisdom book material, which It was all of that was completely suspect and should be just discarded, tossed on the burn pile of history, because it was presented to the families as this is the material in these booklets is what's going to produce a highly educated, highly moral, highly functional adult if you put your kids through these booklets. There was very little actual education. It was indoctrination, and it was indoctrination of how Gothard had systematically cherry picked chunks and sections and one off parts of scripture and strung them together to justify his teachings, to justify his principles, to justify his preferences, and then packaged it as gospel truth because there was enough truth by itself throughout. But the way it was packaged was completely broken. That's completely manipulation.
Did IBLP encourage families to use these wisdom booklets as standalone curriculum, or were parents supposed to be using other curriculum to go along with it?
I don't really remember if IBLP facilitated the parents to and pointed them in the direction of other tools and resources. IBLP definitely presented everything that they had as a one-stop shop for history and science and math and English, which none of it was. But our family, we used some Bob Jones stuff, we used some Rebecca stuff, we patchworked together some other resources and did math and history and some things. Back then, also, our family lived in Northern Virginia. So a lot of times we just went to Washington, D.C. and hiked around museums as for lessons, which was a lot of fun as a kid because, like, field trip, there's always a field trip going on because we're just going to go do, go hike around a museum. But yeah, it was a loving home. My parents loved us. I mean, we didn't get beat. Nobody's an alcoholic or anything like that. But the environment of the home, because of the involvement with IBLP, was very emotionally controlling, spiritually controlling. And it was an environment of compliance for the sake of keeping calm waters. And as the oldest in the family, it just subconsciously fell on me to make sure everybody's happy, to make sure that, if anything was going wrong, it must have been my fault. And a lot of that was just the teaching of the authority structure of how Bill Gothard taught about authority. And there's always the danger of becoming demon possessed. If we expose ourselves to anything, or if anything was going wrong, it must have been some demonic attack for anything.
So you are the oldest. How many siblings do you have?
Yeah, I have a younger brother who's 3 years younger than myself, and then has a younger sister. She's 8 years younger than I am, the oldest
Okay,
of the.
so in the IBLP world, you were actually in a relatively small family then.
we were we were so small. Anything less than eight was, I think, considered a small family. There's only three of us, three kids, and that's all that happened. Looking back, I can see how we stood out. At the time, I don't think I was tuned in enough to recognize some of that. But the larger your family was, definitely the more clout you had and the more spiritual authority you had. If there was more kids in tow, if you drove a big old 15-passenger van, then that household was doing something right.
Good luck getting invited up to the stage to meet Bill with just
Here's,
three kids.
yeah,
Three
here's
kids.
here's a family with three. Yeah, this here's a family with only
Yeah.
three kids. This is what not to do, everybody.
Yeah. I'm curious about how your parents got involved with IBLP. What attracted them, do you think, to this organization?
Yeah, we were initially exposed through the basic seminar, the advanced seminar. That was super popular in our church. I remember going to that as a young kid and attending those conferences. And my parents had already been homeschooling us before we joined IBLP. And then at some point, it was, we're going to now do this new program. But the way that Gothard and that whole machine packaged everything is we've solved the rubric of how to ensure and guarantee that your kid is going to grow up to be a well-developed, well-rounded, successful human being. And we figured out we solved the puzzle on how to have peace in your home, how to create an environment where if anybody walks in the doors of your house, they will see the goodness of God just by stepping foot and interacting with you. And who wouldn't want that? I mean, that's not an unappealing pitch if that's what the hook is. Any parent would want that type of a guaranteed outcome. Unfortunately, so once you start peeling the layers back of what the program was, and that's the tricky thing with IBLP is that, depending on what your involvement is with the program, if it's just a basic seminar, advanced seminar, high level one-off things, it's kind of, yeah, there's some weird stuff in it, but it's not that bad. But the more involved you got, the closer you got to working at a training center, the closer you got to going to Chicago and being in the inner circle of Gothard, as you progressed your way through Dante's Inferno, it got more abusive, it got more culty, it got more damaging. And so there's people that hotly debate, was it a cult, was it not a cult? And I was like, yeah, it's if you were around enough of it, it was a decentralized cult for sure. But if your exposure to it was limited and was at surface level, then it's just this benign kind of quirky, oddball organization. So when my parents, I mean, I don't know what the ultimate point was for them to say, okay, this is the program we're gonna use for our kids, for us. But it was popular back in the early 90s. It was the thing. It was the thing. And the culture within the evangelical movement at large, that organization fit into what the evangelical culture was looking for at the time. And it was a perfect storm.
And maybe that's why a lot of people have had a hard time calling it a cult, because there were so many people in it. You're talking about, perhaps in its heyday, thousands, if not tens of thousands of
Tens
families.
of
So,
thousands. Yeah. Yeah.
you're at the Knoxville conference and you're looking around and you're seeing all of these happy families, or at least from the outside, and you're thinking, how could this be a cult? I'm surrounded by thousands
Hmm.
of other people.
Hmm.
But I think that goes to show us too that cults do come in all different shapes, sizes, and forms, and they don't always conform to one definition or idea that we have. Would you agree?
Oh, completely. I completely agree. IBLP was, I think, a decentralized cult. In the culture that we live in today, I think the word cult gets thrown around way too flippantly, and everybody wants to talk about their cult experience that they had. And it's like, well, no, that was just a friend group that was controlling, right? But I think IBLP at its core, and Gothard's at the core of what he was doing, and the people around him at that very, very inner circle, and how they followed him, how they unquestioningly, I'm not sure if that's even a word, just did what he said, how they lockstep brushed issues and scandal under the rug in order to protect the narrative, in order to keep the presentation. I mean, presentation and the outward expression, there was so much effort put into making sure the facade was pristine. That's a cult. That's very culty. Again, everything was so decentralized. It's all these families consuming all this information, and then all the training centers around the world, and then the big Mecca conference in Knoxville, and then regional conferences from there. But if we had all lived in Waco, Texas together, and if we had
Mm.
all been on the same 200-acre plot of land with all of the same content and all of the same messaging and all of the same information, and it just geographically been in the same place, then I think it's a shut case. There's no argument against whether or not it was a cult, for
So,
sure.
your family, like many other families, was seduced by Gothard's promises of peace and success in life.
Hmm.
And he used that Bible verse. I remember it very clearly a lot, the Proverbs 22:6, about training up a child in the way he should go. And when he
Mm.
is old, he will not depart from it. And I think that he really stated this as a promise. If you
Yeah.
will follow
Yeah.
what I tell you, you have guaranteed success. And I look back on my experience and I have a hard time finding any stories of success. It seems to me like there were far more stories of disaster.
I think the stories of success happened in spite of the environment that we found ourselves in back in the day. And I think the use of that scripture, train up a child in the way he should go, it might be one of the most abused Bible verses to promise a guaranteed outcome. I know plenty of people who
No.
have walked away from it. I know plenty,
Yeah.
plenty of
So
people
do
who have
I.
walked away from it. I mean, for me, the good things that did come out of it was having the chance to go and join the Alert program way back at its very early stages. We got to run around and do masculine, fun, challenging, vigorous things that young men enjoy doing, and the experiences of creating friendships with the guys that I met up there. I'm still friends with a lot of them even today, in spite of the dysfunction and the insanity of IBLP and Bill Gothard. That's like the one thing that I hold on to from those years, is like this was a bit of goodness that came out of it.
And we will talk more about Alert later. Also, we're going to do a special mini episode on the How We Escaped podcast next week with you about this program called Alert. But growing up in your home within the IBLP framework, besides the wisdom booklets, besides the education and the impact of that, what were some other ways in which IBLP affected your daily life and the way that you were raised?
I think the clearest way to summarize it would be that everything is justifiable if the purpose of it is in the name of the kingdom of God. And there's some stories around that for sure, but it affected the household that we grew up in. As a young boy, I remember just believing and thinking that there was like something extra special about us or about me,
Mm.
because we were living this alternative life that was not part of the culture, and we threw all of our rock music tapes away, and we dressed a little bit different than everybody else, and there was this righteous maverick nature to us because we were this select people of God who had an inside track on what the real secrets of being a good Christian were.
So you're strutting around because you're part of this organization, but were you allowed to have any friends outside of IBLP? And were you allowed to see what maybe more of a normal childhood looked like?
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of friends because, again, I'm the oldest, homeschooled, and our little church that we were in, I was also the oldest kid in our church. So I had one or two buddies, but they were also IBLP families, which made it a safe friendship. And I remember, I played little league baseball and stuff like that. I would make acquaintances, but none of those ever really lasted. There was always a big lecture before I ever went anywhere or anybody ever came over on what you may experience and see and hear the music that may be played, and to guard your heart and all of these things. And so there was and again, at the time you just think that it's just par for the course because you're this special little person. But like as an adult now, looking back on it, like we were just always on, it just felt like always on call. You're always on duty
Mm.
to never make a mistake and to never let anything infiltrate your brain or your mind or your psyche, because you will become influenced into the world and demonic oppression and all of these things. So it was like you didn't really know any better at the time, but there was just a ton of pressure. Most of the families in our church were IBLP families. I remember one Sunday a mom came up to me, and she, I can't even remember who she was, but she got down on her knees and put her hands on my shoulders and put her face kind of close to mine. She's like, "Nathan, we are so proud of how you're living your life and the young man you're becoming and growing into." And she's like, "I have told my kids to emulate the way that you live and to watch and to follow what you're doing." And at the time, I was like, "Man, this is cool. It's working, right? All of this, this is neat because you have a kid brain. All kids are idiots mentally. They're lovely and kids are awesome. I love kids, but it's just this skewed paradigm that we were living in and processing in. And so on one hand, I heard her say this and I was like, man, this is cool. I'm doing it. And on the other hand, I was just like, oh shit. I can't catch my breath. There's no way for me to relax. The way that I've learned to describe it to other people as an adult now and as having gone through a lot of healing work is you remember those like wind up tin monkeys that you
Mhm.
wind them up and they have the like the symbols and they got like the really big eyes, the really goofy grin, and you wind it up and it claps the cymbals and then scurries across the table or the floor or whatever. I felt like that monkey, and people would just wind me up and then point me in a direction, and I would just with this weird expression on my face go and do and perform just to keep the adults in the room happy.
Your childhood must have been incredibly stressful.
For sure it was stressful. My mom would tell us, like, before we left the house, she's like, you're leaving the home, make sure you behave, don't do anything bad, don't go anywhere wrong. You're representing, if we run into, she would tell us, like, you don't know if you're going to run into somebody from church, and we need to make sure that we're representing your father and we're representing the church correctly in case we run into anybody that knows us. So when we leave the house, you got to be buttoned up and squared away. And that was stressful as hell. I didn't know it at the time. At the time, I just thought, like, okay, yeah, this is what we do. Because again, we have this righteous, set apart calling on our lives to live and function and do all of these things because we're super special. And so because we're super special, we can handle the stress of needing to walk the straight and narrow at all times. And we had fun. I mean, there were things in the childhood that was fun, but there wasn't a lot of joy. There was always just this stress and this pressure to always have the shiny, happy face. You're always on call to look good.
What happened if you did mess up? Because you were a kid, there's no way that you could be perfect all the time.
Mhm.
What if you did make a mistake, or what if you slipped up?
I don't think I ever made any mistakes. No, I'm kidding. we, I mean, we got punished the way that a lot of evangelical kids got punished back then. I mean, it were spankings and we'd get grounded, or there was always a lecture around on why we aren't allowed to participate in X, Y, and Z. There's always a lecture around why we need to abstain from being bad so that we can maintain a righteous testimony. The appearance of sin was as damning as sin itself. And so, as the firstborn, I mean, there was a teaching, the chain of command was huge in IBLP, and the umbrella of protection, which, just if you're listening, just go Google umbrella of protection. You'll find a picture of it. It's this awful teaching to where Gothard's the man, and then under Gothard is the father of the household, and then under the father is the mother, and then the pecking order down first, second, third, fourth, all the way down to 84th kid in the family, what have you. And what the teaching was is that if you did anything rebellious or stepped out from under authority, if you did anything wrong, you're now exposing yourself to the fiery darts of the enemy, the fiery arrows of the enemy, and you're exposing yourself to the possibility of spiritual attack and maybe even a spiritual possession if you do anything wrong, if you're out from under authority. And the way it would go is if the father did anything wrong, then everybody in the family is now open to spiritual attack. Which I remember at Knoxville, I mean, they paraded families up there and made fathers confess all of this stuff. And then the mother would be like, yeah, we knew something was wrong because we thought there was just a lack of peace in the home, and we figured something was wrong, but we've reconciled, and there's been a confession, and so these testimonies are like, what the I mean, okay, that stuff happens within a marriage. Just leave these people alone. But
Yeah.
the principle of the teaching would then drill down to, if the mother did anything wrong, then she's now out from under the authority of her husband. But all the kids, she and all the kids, because it's this chain, this linked chain, she and all the kids are now open to attack. And then if the firstborn does anything wrong, he's out from under his parents' authority and protection. And now he and all of the younger siblings under him are open to attack, and so on. And it just trickled down all
There
throughout
must
the.
have been a lot of fear attached to this teaching, because I don't have control over what my father does, right? I don't
Right.
have control over what my older sibling does. I don't even
Right.
necessarily know what they're doing in their
Right.
private time, especially. And so there must have
Right.
been this constant fear that, oh my goodness, like, what if someone above me, what if the umbrella above me has a hole
Hmm.
in it? What's going to
Yeah.
happen to me?
Right. Right.
That seems very
Exactly.
unbiblical, too.
Oh, it's complete. It's just manipulation and ways to control people to get them to conform. So, real life example was my younger brother. Everybody kind of goes through puberty in a different way, and they emotionally blossom and develop differently. And my brother was struggling with some stuff. I'm still not even really 100% sure on all of it, but he was stressing out about things and acting out and causing drama and stress in the family as he was growing up. And twice, and I took it upon myself to bear the burden of whatever he was doing, and I have no clue. It was just a kid being a kid. That's all it was. It was just a kid being a rowdy kid. But twice I remember wanting to call a family meeting and making up a sin to confess just so that it would alleviate whatever spiritual attack my brother must be
Mm.
facing in order to cause him to act the way that he's acting.
And were your parents pleased with this? Like, when you made something up, when you confessed it,
Oh, I
was
never
this
I never did.
Oh, you never did?
I never came to calling the meeting and making the confession because I was like, well, if I do that, I'm going to be lying and then I'm going to be out from under authority. And so what do I
Yeah,
do? And then
kind of a
then
vicious
my
circle.
brother would, yeah, yeah, vicious circle. And my brother eventually just sort of calmed down and, we went about our lives. It's just until a couple years ago that I started telling my siblings and my dad about that fun little wrinkle of childhood.
I do believe from the research that I've done and talking to people that women had a much different experience in IBLP than men. So, what about your sister? Do you feel like the negative impact of IBLP
Mm.
was greater or came down harder on her than on the boys?
Yeah. So she got shamed as a young girl by other IBLP kids for not wearing the right type of clothing, not being modest enough, even though she wasn't being immodest. And so she would be slut shamed for, wearing jeans from other kids who had no business giving a review of somebody's outfit, right? But they're
Yeah.
just regurgitating the content that's in their home because of this program. And I have a good relationship with both my siblings, and we've talked a lot about a lot of this growing up, and it's just a lot to unpack. But her growing up, she was 8 years younger, so she was little when we were heavy into the program, and by the time she got into middle school and into high school, we had stopped participating in IBLP at that point. So she got a little bit more of a regular schooling experience.
Before we pivot into a very significant
Mm.
event in your life, tell us about growing up as a pastor's kid and tell us about your church.
So growing up as a pastor's kid was intense. At times described it as, being sacrificed on the altar of ministry. I remember as a young and little guy going on a college campus, and we moved out to the Northern Virginia area to plant a church and going on to, I think it was George Mason University, passing out tracts and inviting students to come to this church that we are starting up, and which is fine, whatever. But I remember I gave a tract to a professor, and he just lit into me and screamed at me and threw it at me and just went on and on and on about how what I was doing was wrong and how it was a lie and garbage and I shouldn't be on the college campus and like berating me. You shouldn't talk to an adult that way, much less a child. I remember standing there just wide-eyed looking up at this guy, frozen in terror, going like, why is this guy so angry at me? I've never had an adult talk to me this way. And I went back and told my dad what happened, and I got, a pat on the shoulder, like, like sometimes you're gonna experience persecution for in the name of the gospel. And so you've done well, son, to receive this persecution and endure it well. The church that we went to was very much a IBLP church. Once a couple of the families got into it, and more families got into it, that strict and very small lens of how to live your life, how to interpret scripture, how to interpret authority, and what that means for engaging in a church is a lot of people that weren't in IBLP just left until it was probably 90% Bill Gothard disciples. And so it created this isolated little community of believers, and everybody was always debating about the music and and thumb wrestling over all those hotly contested and completely unimportant parts of theology. But
Do you
uh,
remember if Gothard's teachings were somehow directly piped into your church, or was it more implied?
I feel like it was more implied. I mean, the whole debate about which instruments were biblical and which instruments were not, like that was a ongoing argument amongst people, and so there was always stress around we can't have drums, and because Gothard taught like anything with a rock beat or a backbeat is just demonic music, and so everything has to be melodic and orchestral in order for it to be worthy of worship. So that music was always a big thing. Ironically, my brother is a musician and can play pretty much any instrument he picks up. And about the same time, he started playing drums and got really, really, really good at it. And and also electric guitar. And he was my brother. Never subscribed to any of the Gothard stuff. He was quite the free spirit.
I've heard some former IBLPers talk about growing up in zealous IBLP families. In these families, the parents took Bill Gothard's rules literally and applied them to every aspect of life. Looking back, do you feel like you grew up in a zealous family?
We were selectively zealous. I mean, we had a TV. That was like the stipulation to be in the program is like you had to not have a TV. A lot of that was my mom. She's like, "No, we're putting a TV in the house." The whole music thing, we bought into that one pretty hard, and so we were selectively zealous. But there were other families that were like hyper IBLP all the way, and so which again adds just to the odd nuance of what it meant to be part of that whole world. Is you could cherry pick what you really wanted to get hyped up about, and you weren't forced to adhere completely strictly to it. Just came down to the preference of the family and how they're going to buy into it.
There were way too many people, of course, for Bill Gothard and IBLP to control directly, but it seems like the people who really subscribed to all of Gothard's teachings did so out of fear. They wanted these promises he made about how great their families would turn out to come true.
Yeah, that's well said. I mean, the promises of guaranteed peace and success, coupled with the control, the hyper controlled environment because of the fear of ever being out from under the drum of authority was so heavily beat that you just couldn't do anything that looked like rebellion and that looked
Yeah.
like stepping out, that looked like even really thinking for yourself or critical thought was a that's a non-starter. You have to be able to fall in line, and you have to just do what you're told. You have to drink the Kool-Aid. You have to be a good soldier. And even if it's to your own detriment, if it's for the good of the family, if it's for the good of the organization, if it's for the good of the kingdom. At that, when I say kingdom, I think it's a lowercase k, but the reference would God's kingdom, but really it's they were just building a lower kingdom of these families with kids that would be lockstep into the ideology that Gothard was serving up.
How we escaped.
Hi, Rob Drake here. Do you have a story of escape to share with us on the How We Escaped podcast? We'd love to hear your story and to consider airing it on our show. You can contact us right now by heading over to howweescaped.com and filling out our contact form. That's howweescaped.com. You can also reach out to us on Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram.
This is the How We Escaped podcast with Rob Drake.
I want to warn our listeners that this next part of your story contains a depiction of sexual abuse. So please skip ahead a few minutes if you need to. Nate, tell us what happened when you were 12 years old.
Yeah, so when I was 12, I don't really remember how we met this neighbor, but she lived a couple blocks away from the townhouse we were living in and had asked if I would come over and do some handyman stuff, work for her, and she'd pay me, and I was always down to making money. She would have me over pretty frequently to do some painting or move trash around, or it was just little piddly stuff. But in the first couple of times she had me over, when I was done with my work, she asked me to come into her room and help her edit a piece of fiction that she was writing, which, as a 12-year-old homeschool kid, I was highly qualified to provide editorial feedback for a piece of writing that someone was giving. But you're just conditioned to always be as helpful as possible all the time. You trust and obey authority. You have to do everything you can to be helpful at all times. So I trusted and obeyed. She was an older adult, and I said, sure. But what she was writing was this erotic fiction stuff. It was stupid. It wasn't even very good. But she invited me in. She was grooming me, invited me into her room, had me read for a couple of times. Nothing happened other than that. And then the next time she invited me in, I thought we were going to read again. And again, you're 12 years old, the hormones are racing, it's salacious. And I had never read or had been exposed to anything like that before. And I was like, man, this is, my goodness, what is this, But the third or fourth time that she had me over, and once the work was done, called me up to her room and then molested me. That first time I remember walking home and my ears were ringing, my head was spinning. If your physical body had responded to something that it was created to respond to, but it was done in such a way that I had never experienced anything like, it's done to a child, right? So you're not mature enough to understand what's going on. And there was no sex ed class in the curriculum, but, this hyper sheltered boy was getting hand jobs.
And did she justify this somehow to you or
No,
make some excuse for it?
no, so the book that she was reading, we were acting out the things
I see.
that she was having me read. And so, no, she didn't justify anything. Let's try this.
No.
And my feet were glued to the floor and I was terrified and didn't know what was going on. But so it happened 3 times, and then she just stopped inviting me over. My physical body responded very positively to the stimulation that it was created to respond to. But there was still also just this incredible amount of fear and guilt and shame and confusion and like all of these other negative emotions wrapped into positive emotions at the same time, and super confusing completely. I was totally underwater emotionally, mentally, and physically just trying, like, what the hell is happening to me? So it got to the point where I was like, well, I have to confess this because I enjoyed it. And so I've done something wrong and I've sinned. So it's time to confess. And so I went to a trusted adult and told this person what had happened. And the response that I got was, we need to pray for this lady so that she meets Jesus. Not meets Jesus, kill her, but meets Jesus. Like that would actually probably have been a more appropriate response. But she needs to find Jesus. We need to pray for her. And we can't talk about this because it'll damage your father's ministry. And I remember hearing that and being like, that's not the response that I think I should be getting, or that's not what I expected to happen. But you're an adult, you're an authority figure. I'm going to trust you. And I will just not talk about it ever. And so over the next 6 months or so, Gothard had a teaching that, like, if you're falling asleep, sleep was this big thing for him. Like you don't have control over your thoughts when you sleep, and because you don't have control over what's going on in your brain and you're not awake, then you're susceptible to demonic attack. And so you need to take every thought captive, and you need to make sure that you protect yourself while you're sleeping. And so the best thing to do would be to envision Jesus hanging on the cross as you drift off to sleep, so that that memory is playing on repeat while you are asleep, and it's playing on repeat subconsciously for you. And so I would just imagine Jesus hanging on the cross, dying for all of our sins, as I tried to force myself to forget what had happened to me. I remember going to sleep and mentally dislodging myself from my body. And I would lay there and be like, I can see that my body is in this bed, but myself, as the human part of myself, is disconnected from this body. And I would just go through this exercise of disassociation coupled with imagining Jesus on the cross, because I must have sinned in order to have allowed this abuse to happen. And then finally the memory was gone. And I had blacked out what happened. And it wasn't until about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, that it came back.
Yeah, so ironically, it sounds like what you're saying is this technique that you were taught, it did work.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
it made the memory disappear, but obviously this was not healthy. When you were told by this authority figure that you needed to protect the ministry and to keep this quiet, did this make sense to you as a matter of honor? Of course I want to
Oh,
protect my father's
of
ministry.
course.
Of course
Yeah.
I want to do this.
It felt like this is a way to wrap a worthy cause around something that I know is pretty icky and wrong. And it added like this spiritual nobility to enduring a trial and to enduring persecution. And so it was confusing, but I wasn't hurt by it in the moment, not at all. I thought it was if it's in the name of the kingdom, then rock and roll, let's go storm the gates, and this is the worthy cause.
And I imagine that within an IBLP context, going to a counselor or a therapist, that was out of the question, right? Impossible.
Oh, not even just the IBLP context. I would say that up until very recently, and even then, I think it's limited. Just the evangelical church context, IBLP included, the thought and idea of professional counseling and therapy was there's a huge stigma around it, because the Bible is the final authority. Jesus is the great healer. If you've got anything wrong, you look to Scripture first and only, because um, if you're sad, go serve. If you're depressed, go serve. If there's anything that you're wrestling or struggling with, if you're sick or wrestling or struggling with anything, then there's a good chance that there may be unconfessed sin. And so, like, the whole mental health world and option for healing was just a huge um a huge thing. That door, you did not open it. No, 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 because the church is the source of your healing. Jesus is the source of your healing. The pastors are your counselors. They're the authorities that have been placed in your life to provide the guidance that you need for your life. And um and yeah, mental health has been fumbled um uh, terribly over the decades um, by evangelicals at large, but especially Gothard, and they fumbled it. They made an art out of how to fumble um, trauma, how to deal with trauma. Their teachings were just shit.
How do you think IBLP teachings had an impact on how this authority figure responded to you when you revealed what happened to you?
Yeah, the teachings around abuse were very direct on that. If you're on the receiving end of abuse, it's your fault. You must have done something to welcome it. If you're on the receiving end of abuse and it doesn't stop, it's your fault for not crying out to God loud enough. And so your prayers are ineffective. And if you're on the receiving end of abuse, when it's done, you are to count it all joy, because you have endured suffering and because you have endured persecution in the name of the Lord. It's really a badge of honor to wear. that God has entrusted you enough and thinks that you're strong enough to bear the burden of having been abused. That is what they teach. And it's criminal. We open the conversation talking about all those kids singing, "It will be worth it all." It puts the context of that song into such a bitter light because it's not worth it all. Nothing is justifiable to cover up, brush aside, ignore, or try and spiritualize the abuse of a child, the abuse of anybody, regardless of their age, regardless of their gender. And if the program that guarantees peace and joy in your home tells you that it's a badge of honor to receive abuse from an adult, then it gives you a get out of jail free card if you're an abuser.
Well, we are going to talk about your recovery process here in a few minutes because there is a lot of hope in this story that we want to share with our listeners. But first, I wanted to ask you about what happened as you approached graduation from high school. Was there any discussion in your family about attending university?
Zero. The discussion was, you're not going to go, you'll end up in debt. The idea of higher education was really, you're going to be exposed to principles and the theology of the world, which will pull you off the righteous path that you've been trained up in. And so the option of higher education was off the table. There was never a time growing up where I considered, I'm going to go to college one day. And let's think through what those, let's go apply to colleges. I have never stepped foot in a college classroom. I have 0 credits of any sort, never taken anything online. And so at the time back then, I moved out of the house. I left home at 17, went to Alert. I don't even have a GED. I have nothing. I mean, I'm this feral 48-year-old man with such minimal formalized education. I've taught myself plenty of things along the way, and I'm plenty intelligent. I've learned a lot. I've experienced a lot. It's been a cool life. I got a lot of cool stories. But I left home at 17, and there's no high school graduation of any sort. I just went to Alert and spent 3 years running around, going through their program and deploying all over the country and internationally, and got some of the construction training.
I want to alert our listeners, no pun intended, that I'm going to release a mini episode of the How We Escaped podcast next week with our fascinating discussion about this program called Alert, which I also attended. Alert stands for the Air Land Emergency Resource Team, and you may be surprised to hear what we have to say about it. So make sure you tune in next week. Nate, tell us about what happened after you finished Alert. What was next for you?
Yeah, I get out of Alert and start working. I get a job doing ministry work because that was, I knew how to talk about Jesus and I knew how to be nice, and I had no clue about what is a career? What is a career? I still am trying to figure that one out. But I started working in a ministry and met this cute girl, and we decided to get married, and then we started having kids and moved around a bit. And, I've worked in so many various disjointed, strange jobs and career paths. And I haven't really had a traditional career trajectory of any sort. I've just had jobs in various industries. I'm closing in on 50 at this point. I'm like, where's the 401k? Where is the, there should be something to look back on. And I've just been bootstrapping it for 20, not even 20. So for almost 30 years, I've just been bootstrapping jobs, and they all just sort of eventually kind of fizzle out because for one reason or another, just, bad luck, bad timing, stuff like that. So it's been a struggle, but you learn to teach yourself new things. You learn to adapt and adjust, and you learn to recreate yourself over and over and over again, and which isn't fun.
It's interesting that not going to college didn't prevent you from getting married or having a beautiful family, and it sounds like you've been able to support them, but I know it's been tough. Do you hold your parents responsible for these challenges that you have had as a result of not going to college? Do you think they had any idea about the consequences of this decision?
No, I don't think so, because I remember even thinking back then as a child, like, listen, our entire lives are dedicated to the kingdom and doing Jesus work. And so, like, long-term planning or long-term strategic thinking is unnecessary because Jesus is coming back any day. And what's the point of saving money? What's the point of a career trajectory or a path? God's coming back at any minute. And so our duty and our work is to usher the return of Jesus, and everything else be damned. That was just the mindset of the culture outside of even IBLP, just the religious culture that I grew up in. So um, I don't think there was any thought around like, hey, if Nate doesn't go to college, this is the struggle of a career struggle he's gonna have to work through. I just think it was debt is the worst thing ever, and secularism that's so readily available in college is also the worst thing ever, and we can't have him exposed to either of those things.
Let's talk about your recovery process because this is very important.
Yes, this is the
And
fun stuff.
yes, and it hasn't been so long ago that you started your recovery process. Am I
Yeah.
correct about that?
Yes, that is a true statement. So what triggered the recovery process? One of the jobs I had was pastoring at a church, and I was very good at it. But through a string of miscommunication, of belligerent, purposeful unwillingness to take a pragmatic approach to understanding the scope of a situation, I was forced to resign for some. It had nothing to do with conduct issues. It was just really poor leadership.
It
So
wasn't a scandal.
no, there was no scandal. There was no cocaine involved. There was no, I wasn't banging the
Illicit affair with,
secretary.
yeah.
I mean, banging the secretary and doing cocaine would have been justifiable, but none of that happened. None of it happened at all. It was just a safe face. And so I was forced to resign. And all of a sudden, again, going, all right, I was like 45, 46 at the time. And I was like, here I am again. I have to go recreate myself again. And about a year before I separated from working at church, like there was something in my mind. Like I remember sitting in a meeting and I was like, guys, there's something going on inside my brain that is, I feel like I'm getting ripped in half. I don't know what it is. And I am terrified. And they're like, well, you know, nobody really knew what to do with it. And they're like, well, go to a Christian counselor and see if you can figure it out. And I was like, I don't want somebody to just put a Bible verse on top of a wound, like on top of a thing that's not helpful.
Yeah.
So the unwinding had begun before I separated from working at the church. And that was the church we'd gone to for 18 years, the church my boys had been baptized at. And then I worked at for 7 years. And like our whole community instantly evaporated. And there was maybe 2 or 3, 4 people that sort of reached out. But other than that, we were just out to sea. And so the weight of having to figure out how to recreate myself again professionally, the weight of trying to identify that there's something going on inside and I do not know what is happening, what it was. My subconscious was trying to remind me of that childhood trauma. Because again, at this point, it was still blacked out. I had remembered it. And so all of the stress, the community is gone. The friends, guys that I thought were my friends turned out to not be my friends. And just this complete abandonment was devastating. And the depression was really intense. And I didn't know what to do with it. And I found myself, my sons were out, they were working, and my wife was at work. And I spent multiple hours, 2 to 4 hours, with my handgun on the table sitting in front of me. And I just stared it down, not knowing if I could handle processing whatever the unnamed, elephant in the room was, not knowing if I had it in me to recreate myself again, not knowing if I could endure just the incredible pain of being rejected the way that we had been rejected. And not knowing if I had it in me emotionally to keep going. We're recording this episode today, so obviously I kept going.
Yeah. Would you say that was like the lowest
Oh, yeah.
lowest point for you?
That was a dark day. Yeah. Yeah, that was a tough day. But even in that day, and I know this thought isn't really like unique to me, but like the thought was like, man, just the logistical pain in the ass it would cause the rest of the people
Yeah.
around me. I don't want to put them through that. I guess I'll just keep, guess I won't kill myself today because it's going to make a mess and it's going to be a pain, it'll be a logistical pain in the ass. And like that was one of the reasons I found to take it another day at a time. Give it
And did
another
your
shot.
family have any idea what was going on inside your head?
My boys had no clue. My wife, she knew something was wrong, but she didn't know. She didn't know about that day. Actually, she didn't know about that day until a couple months ago.
Mm.
You're just trained to grin and bear it and to keep quiet, just to keep
And
quiet
that
about it.
and that's I mean, that goes all the way back, right, to
Right.
your
Yeah.
early
Yeah.
childhood. You
Yeah.
were just
Yeah.
conditioned to do
Yeah.
that.
You just take one for the team. So my wife did, and to her credit, one morning she was going to work and she looked at me and she's like, you either need to go to therapy or you can move out and figure out what you need to get. She's like, pull your shit together, man. Yeah.
Mm.
She's like, you are suffering, you're depressed, you've got to go figure something out. She's like, I love you, but you got to go figure this out. Go to therapy. And that idea was terrifying because you start pulling the thread on therapy and who
Yeah.
knows how the sweater is going to come unraveled. But so I went to a therapist. She and I didn't really mesh very well, but she told me about this program called ACA, which is Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. And she's like, go to the meeting. It's a 12 step, there's 12-step programs for everything, but she's like, it's this 12-step program for for people who grew up in dysfunctional environments. And I was like, fine, whatever. It's like, I don't have a community of any sort. I'll go, fine, I'll go. And she's like, this will be your new church for a season. This is just your community. These people will love you. Like, okay, cool. So I started going to this program, ACA. I still go today as much as I can when I'm in town. They read this thing called the laundry list, and it's just this descriptor of all of the markers of an adult who grew up in a dysfunctional environment. And I sat there and my jaw was on the floor, and I was like, what the fuck? My parents weren't alcoholics, but the environment was plenty dysfunctional. And most of the markers presented in myself the same as somebody who grew up in an alcoholic home. And
Wow.
I was stunned, very disorienting. Part of me also, I mean, fresh out of being a pastor, a part of me was like, oh, these people, I was like, I have all the answers for these people. let me, let me follow up on what you just shared. And let me tell you what the
Let me
right
get
thing to
my
do
Bible
is.
out.
Yeah, right. Exactly right. One of the rules though, is if you share, like like your share is your share. There's no follow up to it. There's no asking questions about it. There's no correcting anybody. You just share your truth for where you are and what's going on. And that is the best. Oh my goodness, that's the best. Because it just creates this environment for vulnerability and openness and raw. I mean, this is the room that the very first time I retold the story of how I was molested was in one of those rooms before I even told my wife, because of how safe and how loving the people in these groups are.
When you told that story and you
Mhm.
walked out of that room that night, how did you feel?
Oh, good question. Similar to the way I felt when I walked home after being molested, but not in like a bad way. I mean, lightheaded. The adrenaline was surging. I felt a weight off of me. So there was like some of the similar adrenaline surge. I felt a weight off of me. I was super lightheaded. I mean, I had to sit in my truck for probably 15 minutes and just collect myself, going, oh my gosh, what have I just made it known. But I felt empowered. I felt like I had taken this agency back. It was scary, but I felt loved and protected also by these people. And nobody really followed up or said anything, but a lot of people just came up and gave me a hug afterwards, and most of them just said, keep coming back, keep coming back. And that was
Mm.
it. And nobody's trying to fix or solve anybody's problems. They're just creating this really safe room, a really safe environment to work through the shit that happened.
So you mentioned that the first therapist you talked to didn't work out. Did you end up finding a good therapist?
I did find a therapist. I mean, I went on psychologytoday.com and just started
Mm.
looking through who's close, right? And I found this guy. He's fantastic. And he specializes in this modality called EMDR, which is a practice that activates both hemispheres of the brain while you are replaying a memory in your mind, and kind of overexposure to a stressful memory. And then the way that EMDR happens is it activates both sides of your brain while the overexposure is happening. And it physically repairs parts of your brain and then
Wow.
reduces the PTSD that had been in place because of the trauma. So the first time I ever met with him, he had me take the survey, and he's, yeah, you register a, like a 7 out of 10 on the PTSD scale. I was like, that's bullshit. Only people that have been in war have
Yeah.
PTSD. And so I started arguing. He's like, no, you have complex PTSD. It's a real thing. Go look it up. And he knew. He's like, this guy's too mouthy. he's, he's a little too cocky, a little too full of himself. And so we started working through the trauma of spiritual abuse. We started working through the emotional abuse, and just all of these major themes throughout life. And I was talking to him. I was like, Larry, I think I may have been molested when I was a kid, but I'm not sure. And he's like, okay, we'll figure it out. And so this was several months into therapy. I was getting good at and learning how to utilize EMDR in the therapist room. And then also I had been just doing it with myself at home, which is, I recommend everybody just do it with a therapist. Don't do it by yourself. But I was doing it by myself because I teach myself to do things, right? So I'd been doing it at home, and this is the rowdy, scandalous part, but it's not. It's incredible. But learning how to take mushrooms as part of a psychedelic therapeutic healing part tool. Nobody should take them just to party. That is
Yeah.
the absolute wrong thing to do. But to take them for the purpose of inner healing, to take them for the purpose of processing emotions, processing memories, processing trauma, what have you, it's irrefutable how beneficial it is and how it helps people to work through, who have PTSD, what have you, to work through trauma. What it does is it allows you to replay memories without the negative emotion of the memory. And so you
Mm.
can do the overexposure EMDR therapy around it. So one day I was home alone and had several hours, probably about 6 hours of being at the house by myself. So I partook. And before I went in, I was like, I want to know if this being molested was a real thing or not. And so I took them, had, good music, a playlist that I'd curated, ready to, in my AirPods, mask to put on, and went and laid down. And the brain lights up when you take this in such a way that it physically heals the brain. Like your brain responds in such a positive way when psilocybin is applied to it. It's fantastic. But in my mind, I'm laying there listening to music, and then all of a sudden I'm back at my house that I lived in when I was 12 years old, but I'm there as an adult. And I walk out of my front door, I walk down the street, around the corner, around the other corner, walk to this lady's house. I open her door, I walk up the stairs to her bedroom. I pull the black curtain back that was in front of her door, which wasn't there in real life. It was just there because I had forced the memory to disappear. I opened the door. I witnessed what she had done to me as a 12-year-old. I'm standing in the room as a 12-year-old. And I take the hand of this little boy and I walk him back down the stairs out of her house. I close the door to her house and I walk him back home and I put him away in his home, and it went through this reparenting protection ceremony to take care of this inner part of my inner child that had been wounded so deeply.
Wow.
And then I came out of it. Once the trip was over, you come out of it, and I'm laying there. I'm like, what It just happened, right? The next day I have a therapy session. I'm like, Larry, this is guess what just happened? We've been working together for a while. He's like, what did you do, Nate? I recalled the whole story to him. I told him in detail everything, and he's like, let's do some EMDR work around it. And he's like, you can't fake processing things in EMDR. Like if you're he said he has clients that like make up stories and then try and do EMDR. You can't do EMDR around a made up story. You can only do it around something that's authentic and real. And if you try and do it around something that is a made up story, the whole process just falls apart. And because I even like in that moment, I was sitting in his office. I'm like, did I just make this up? Is this just a fictitious thing? Did this really happen? Tell me, help me understand. And he's like, we'll figure it out. So we go through all the exercises and go through the whole process of it. And he's like, it really happened.
You view
And
yourself, or do you refer to yourself as a victim?
I don't know. I was a victim. I experienced something that nobody should have to experience. But I don't walk around with that as a key marker in my identity today. So I'm somebody that's healed. I still go to ACA every week when I'm able to. I'll attend those meetings for the foreseeable future. But the idea of being a victim, I'm somebody that was on the receiving end of abuse, and that abuse took form in several different ways. But I still firmly believe in grace. I still firmly believe in forgiveness. I still firmly believe in righteous judgment. I still firmly believe in Jesus. The things that happened to me are not the primary identifier of who I am. For years, they were the primary driver of how I process life.
So many others with similar experiences to you have deconstructed and completely left the faith, but you have not. How have you managed to hold on to your faith?
Well, I've deconstructed, though. But some people deconstruct like we're flushing everything down the toilet, and I for whatever reason they want to walk away from all of it. I'm not gonna criticize anybody's journey or anybody's path. That's for them to figure out. My wife and I we have deconstructed evangelicalism, and we've deconstructed the Western church model, in the way that in the West, America, church has evolved. Not all of them, but a lot of them has evolved into program-driven, tithe-gathering, nonprofit organizations that happen to do church activities, which aren't all inherently bad, but it's not really church, and it's not a proper way that we believe to live out an expression of faith as a follower of Jesus. We're still trying to figure out where we end up landing on all of it. But I mean, we haven't been to a church service since we left the church we were at, and we have no real desire to go back to any of it. And how that all unfolds is, which for some people that may sound like really, really scary. And oh my gosh, they're gonna, no, we'll be okay. I mean, it's okay it's healthy to deconstruct, right? It's healthy to second guess and evaluate and take a fine tooth comb and a magnifying glass to things that are historic in your life that need to be worked through. And
I think for many people who were born into IBLP and who grew up in IBLP, Christianity and IBLP were inevitably intertwined. And so when they deconstructed, they threw out the whole thing. They threw out, perhaps you could say, the baby with the bathwater. But it seems like with you, you were able to perhaps separate these and say, okay, what IBLP was espousing as the true faith or as the word of God was actually not that. And there's something else that is true, but it wasn't IBLP. And so I don't have to throw all of it out.
Yeah, like my exposure to Christianity wasn't first from IBLP. Our household was, we were taught the Bible pre-IBLP. And so that probably has something to do with it. But I'm never shocked when somebody's like, you know what, this is what I experienced, and fuck it all. I'm not gonna do it again, because a thought I've had around spiritual abuse, sexual abuse, especially when it happens to children, is that they're almost one and the same. Like sexual abuse is the physical stimulation to your body and to somebody who's not mature enough to process it completely and to understand fully what's going on. And so it leaves this marker, and it skews your development, and it skews the way that you perceive and process and filter the world if you experience something like that as a child. Obviously, it doesn't as an adult. Also, I'm just saying that all abuse is awful, but sexual abuse, as it stimulates the physical body, spiritual abuse stimulates the soul. And when it happens to a child, you're this growing, maturing soul of a person that is being stimulated in a way that you're not mature enough to process. Your soul's responding in a way that it's created to respond, but it's being manipulated at the same time. And so then you grow up with this skewed spiritual perspective and a distorted filter to process the world with. And so that's why I think people that experience spiritual abuse at a young age, their deconstruction is just nuke it all and go figure something out. And it's unfortunate, but it's completely understandable. It's completely understandable. Deconstruction is very hard work. It is very, very hard work, because it ties into to family of origin stuff. It ties into childhood stuff. It ties into like so much of your core identity, the DNA of who you are. And it's a lot of work to go and figure out what needs to be cast aside and what needs to be held on to, and how hard do you want to hold on to the parts that need to be held on to. And yeah, it's a big work, but it's worth it, and it's worth it. It's worth it.
So, what do you say to someone who has had a similar experience and they know they need to deconstruct? Where should they start?
Go to therapy. Find an ACA group, because you grew up in a dysfunctional environment. Go adultchildren.org is there's somewhere on the website is the list of meetings, and they are all over the country. They're all over the world. Find an ACA group and just go and sit and listen and see what comes up. Go to therapy. And I would say, don't be in a hurry to deconstruct. Let it happen as slowly as possible, while also retaining your own personal agency and retaining your own personal identity. And so don't deconstruct and then go to therapy. Start your healing journey first, and then slowly deconstruct second. Because we may accidentally trip over ourselves to deconstruct quickly before the healing part starts. I'm not a professional. I'm just a knucklehead that's doing his best to heal his own journey.
Yeah. Well, Nate, as we wrap up this interview, I want to ask you how you are now on a day-to-day basis. How are you feeling? I know you said you're still going to this group, but what is it like now?
It is brilliant and is difficult. There's the brilliance and the beauty in things now are, I'm able to look back and see progress. I can look back and recognize the effort put into healing is paying off and working. There's still days though you get up and you're like, dang it, man, if only this. You second guess, and if only my life had started and the trajectory had gone in this direction. But that's a game of comparison that never really plays out well. Yeah. But still, what it is there is still moments of grief that jump up and that are startling and that surprise me. And there's days where I'm like, nope, I'm good. We're cruising along, and then for whatever reason, my subconscious is like, nope, we're going to go work on something, and then grief will rear its ugly head. But the tools are in place to The community is in place to step into it. Our community now is the most authentic, loving, not flinching at anything that's shared with them, and supportive group of people that we've ever been around. And it's because they're all on some type of healing process themselves. And there's no posturing and there's no peacocking around. There's just a lot of newfound strength in a group of people that have humbly walked through some dark days. Things are good and
Yeah.
challenging, but I don't know if I'd want to live a life where it's just good all the time.
That would be too boring.
That would be way too boring, brother.
My last question for you, Nate, is if that kid who was told to behave every time he left the house, that was you, that kid who was performing goodness for a watching world, if that kid who was you could hear you right now through the years, through the decades, what would you want him to know?
Oh, man. I'd want him to know that oh gosh, dude, that's quite a question. I would want him to know that it's okay to be yourself. I'd want him to know that he'll be protected. I'd want him to know that strength comes through being courageous enough to be authentic. And strength does not come through jumping through the hoops and performing for the people around him. That's what I want him to know.
Nate, I want to sincerely thank you for coming on the How We Escaped podcast to share this difficult story, but yet it is also a story full of hope, and I think it's a story that is going to help many people. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob. I've very much enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate the work you're doing with this podcast.
Don't forget to tune in next week for a special mini episode of the How We Escaped podcast, where I'll share my conversation with Nate about Alert. If you've been enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, and if you're listening on YouTube, give the video a thumbs up. It really helps support the show, and I truly appreciate it. You can explore all of our shows by visiting howweescaped.com. I'd like to close today's show with a quote from the author J.R.R. Tolkien in The Fellowship of the Ring. All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woken. A light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken. The crownless again shall be king. Until we meet again, I'm Rob Drake. Yellaby.
Share your story of escape with us at howweescaped.com. How We Escaped.